I know my last name is like super long and complicated, so it's Andrea La Valleur-Purvis. I'm originally from the UK with an American mom. Grew up in, we lived in England when I was quite young, and then we moved to Germany and spent really my childhood in Europe, and moved to the States when I was 18. And then ended up in art college. I loved always working in the arts. I had my first art competition, I think it was, at the age of 5 or 6, and won that. And I think that gave me some good confidence as a young person. And then I just always pursued that. My mother was a photojournalist, so I was always exposed to photography and the art world. We also, because we did live in Europe, we traveled to very many museums and sometimes galleries, a lot of historical sites around Europe that I've had the privilege of actually seeing in person. And so there's just a really rich history there. And then I went to art school and to be a designer, actually. And then somewhere in the middle of my second year, I think it was, I had some exposure to metal sculpture and fell in love and switched my degree and ended up graduating with a BFA in sculpture. Gosh, I would say I've always been a very curious person. I'm interested in a variety of things. And I think what sparked my curiosity as a kid was, we got to like travel and experience different cultures, food, creativity. We saw lots of artisans and artists. So that to me is very interesting. Mm-hmm. I love, in my personal work, I love using found objects, which really, I enjoy two sides of it. One, the hunt and discovery for the thing that I find interesting. So I'm drawn to various, not just metal pieces, but different materials that had a previous life. And then I incorporate them in my work. And oftentimes all you recognize is a pattern or a shape. You might not actually recognize what it used to be. And so I give it a new life. And I oftentimes create new patterns with the objects that I find and or make from it that fit together. And but yeah, going back to your question, I think it's good to be exposed as a young person to a variety of different things so that you get different experiences and decide what interests you most so that you can pursue that and discover if it's something that you want to invest like your career into, or just a hobby or a passion project. I'm actually currently working on a 3-piece public art sculpture for the city where I live, which is not including found objects, however, because it had a different criteria. But I'm actually looking at a pile of things that I bought recently when I was at a thrift store / estate sales / antique market. And I would find these unusual things, like, for example, I picked up some old machinery pieces. One metal shape is like a fluted pressed metal shape that I think at one point used to be the base of a light or some kind of a candle. So it just has this beautiful shape to it. I don't know yet what I'm going to make with it, but when it does include found objects, I typically look at what I have and depending on if I already know if it's just going to be a single piece or a piece that belongs to a body of work. Then I'm just thinking back on some other pieces that I've made. I had some fantastic exposure to metal foundry when I was a little bit younger, and got to experience the world of casting bronze, aluminum, and iron. That process is also quite different because you have so many other things to consider when making your positive mold, your positive kind of prototype that then is in the process and has a kind of a lengthy process and produced. And then my current work, is using welding and plasma cutting. Thankfully, technology has evolved, and we are using kind of a plasma CNC type machine that runs through a computer program. So I sketched something that I then pulled into a design program that I then pulled into the program that is run by the machine, and then it gets cut out on a sheet of metal. And so, and then in this particular project that I'm describing, and maybe we can send a link to some of my photos and work in progress, because it's not quite a finished project yet. So we are, I'm creating 3 sculptures of a series of 6. And so I have another artist friend who's working with me. And these are for the city of Waco, Texas, where we live. And so each one of them has a theme that speaks to the region where we live and what the city is known for. And many people know Waco, Texas for 2 reasons. One is Magnolia, and one is the cult that had kind of a not so great PR moment, and really a tragedy that happened. I didn't even know 2 or 3 decades ago. And so there's a lot of other beautiful things to say about Waco. And I'm a newbie here. I've only lived here a year, but it's an interesting way to look at creating something that has this, predefined kind of theme that we then get to create something for that represents the space that we live in. And what I didn't get to share in my intro is actually that I spent the last 20 years in a slightly different aspect of a creative career, and that is being a designer in the tech world. And what I learned in that 20 years of work is when you have a predefined goal, project, deadline, and so forth, I actually learned that I like to work that way. So working on this public commission has been really good for me, because we had a predefined theme, we had a deadline. The deadline has changed a little bit, but within reason, it's still a deadline. And so then I was able to creatively kind of problem solve and come up with ideas. And then we got accepted and got into production. So those types of things help me in my personal artwork. So I currently have, the Notes app on my phone where I write. Oftentimes I have, when I read something or hear somebody speak, or I see a piece of work in a gallery, and when I'm visiting another artist studio, I have like titles of artworks kind of pop into my mind. So I'm keeping track of those and really using that as an influence to when I'm in front of creating a new body of work. I'm very much drawn to art from the 60s, specifically the metal sculptors and artists that were working in that period. And so you might be familiar with some of these, like David Smith, Marc de Suvero, Alexander Calder, Picasso's early work I'm quite fond of. Nice. And so those types of artists I'm really inspired by. Deborah Butterfield. I mean, there's so many. I'm surrounded by books here on my desk, and I recently picked up this fabulous book that was produced as part of a private collection, and it ended up having probably 10 of my favorite artists in their private collection. So I had to have the book, and it's so wonderful to kind of see, how different artists have inspired me. And most of them, if I think back to them, even Isamu Noguchi is an artist that I love their aesthetic. All of these are fairly I wouldn't call Picasso a minimalist, but the others certainly a bit more minimalist. So minimalist and very simplistic in their shapes. In Picasso's work, the works that I'm speaking about are specifically some of his portraiture, where he did simplify the person's features with simple shapes like triangles and circles, and they were not hard geometric shapes, but they were implied. And I quite love that juxtaposition of a layer where you're taking something that was originally realistic to, changing it into a shape that could sometimes even become pattern-like. And so again, that all kind of inspires me in my own work, and that's what I'm attracted to. So I also was very spoiled. I spent the last 5 years, right before I moved here to Waco, Texas, in Barcelona, in Spain. And so, there's quite a few public pieces by Picasso that you can just go see around the city, and then a private museum and a variety of other wonderful places to see his work throughout Spain and France. So along with other artists who's like I got to see. I'm not a big Dali fan, but because he did live in Spain, I did go see, one of his summer homes and some other places where he used to live. And so there's, memorials and homes that have been turned into museums. And so it's really fun to get to see that kind of thing in person. I have a lot of public art, that's very visible in the main parts of the city, and then a number of hidden treasures. But Spain is definitely a great place for art. Madrid also, and Sevilla. So definitely worth considering going. And, the food and the weather is fantastic. So essentially what I've done in this last year has been taking everything that I've learned in the last 20 plus years from working as a fine artist in fine art services, and then also as a designer in the tech space. And I had many roles in the 20-year career where I got to have different exposure across running creative projects, running a business, marketing. I spent a number of those years designing websites, working with copywriters, learning how to write copy, and just how to organize a creative business. And I think us artists sometimes are a little bit like unicorns. We don't fit the standard business model in the sense that many businesses are created to have an exit strategy and generate, potentially 7 figures. Obviously, not every business does that, but that oftentimes, or like having employees, and all of that is certainly possible as an artist, except for the exit strategy part, because we are the creators. And so even if you become like a Jeff Koons, where you're not actually creating most of the art physically, you're concepting the art, that's definitely a unicorn experience, I would say. But what I found a need for is artists need guidance and direction. They need strategic thinking and kind of help figuring out what to focus on to be able to become visible, to make consistent income. And these days, I think it's such a perfect time to be an artist, actually, because there's many ways that you can make money as an artist. There's, obviously the gallery route, but that typically will be a slower process if you're just starting out, or even if you're somewhere in the mid stages of your career. If you're not constantly pursuing exposure in galleries, and also, as you probably know, your art might not be desirable for the next few years. It might be in 10 years' time, people are really attracted to your work. And so I was actually just talking on the podcast that aired today with Mark Dennis, how some of the people that are collecting his work 10 years ago weren't interested in his work, but now they are. And so you just never really know when you're in the gallery model, when you make money, which means you then typically supplement. And if you think about the BFA, MFA route, which I would call more of a traditional artist route, many of them became professors and lecturers. And that's certainly a fantastic way to still be part of the art world, because you get certain times of the year where you can invest time in working on your work. But these days, there's, I can tell you 10 ways in 2 minutes of how to make money as an artist, and you just need to pick one and do it. And so part of what I do is really educating the artists that I work with what options are available. And then I'm a big proponent of designing a business around your creative practice and your lifestyle. So some artists create 10 pieces a month, and some artists create 10 pieces a year. So there's, you need to know what your availability and ability to produce is. And then, you need to think about what it is that you want to achieve. And many artists are really focused on the creation aspect, and they don't want to deal with sales and marketing, or they don't want to have goals. And well, that type of artist probably won't do well with me. And quite frankly, I want to work with a motivated artist who wants to achieve something, because most of the time they're just looking for, how do I do that? Right. And so that's what I typically help them figure out, is the wayfinding. How do I get from A to B? And of course, there's, a lot of different things in the middle of how to get there. And oftentimes there's even more way than one. But being consistent in your public profiles, making sure that your website is technically optimized, but also interesting to look at, is informative, like the quality of the presentation is good, that it actually has the right type of content depending on who your audience is, doing some back work of discovering who your ideal audience actually is for your type of work, because that's going to be different. And I also believe in that you need a framework, but not every strategy is going to work the same for every artist. So making sure that we can adapt based on the artist aesthetic, but also just working habits is so important. Yes, thank you. Great question. So I typically don't offer a single session, mostly because it's not going to add a lot of value to you as an artist, because there's too many pieces of the pizza, so to speak, right? It's certainly a great way to connect, to figure out what challenges you're struggling with the most. But I offer one-on-one consulting at 3 different levels of working together. And I actually just opened up the enrollment for my Artist Pro Circle, which is a 6-month program. And we work with artists during that time period to cover like the foundational parts of creative entrepreneurship. I bring subject matter experts in to talk about and go deeper on certain aspects of marketing, or even finance and art law, where I'm not a subject matter expert whatsoever. One thing that I have been that I find myself to be very helpful at and good at is that in design, we have this reference of a T-shaped designer, and I apply that same as like an art business consultant. Is I have a broad depth that crosses the top of a capital T, and then I can go very deep on certain aspects, especially around the website side of marketing and technology. I'm really great and look for opportunities to bring in technology to highlight the experience, the digital experience of sharing your art, being intentional. I'm a big fan of being intentional and then building a strategy around your intention and having the accountability. That's kind of the biggest thing. Being part of a small community in these small groups is what I've heard most artists want. And when I know for myself too, this totally applies, is when you have the accountability of other people, you tend to have better results because you are on the hook for it, right? You said you were going to do it and then you do it, but it's also like being in a group of people who are motivated to reach really their deepest desires is so rewarding and encouraging. And so naturally you want to do more because you see your peer group being, you know, in their own right, successful, doing the things that they love to do. And one thing I'd like to add to that too is, you know, working on your mindset is so important. That's some work that I've personally done in my own personal development. And, you know, I've done all kinds of trainings with important people in the business world. And a lot of it's like what we think about, what are our thoughts? What are we saying in our thoughts? And making sure that we have a positive perspective. And then when we notice, you know, language that's really limiting us, that we reframe that and focus on turning that into a positive statement. So we can work in conjunction with our subconscious to, you know, live our best life. So yeah, we cover all kinds of aspects in the Artist Pro Circle, and I'm excited to bring that to life this year. So this is a program that I've just opened up, and bringing my one-on-one work into a small group setting. You know, I know that there's lots of mentors out there, and even in the art business space where, you know, they teach you overviews of things, but so many of them don't go deep and show you the tactical piece. And that is where I feel like I can shine, because I am a big believer in having resources available that are useful and adaptable, and can be used right away. So I have made a lot of templates that can be used with guides to explain the thinking behind it and how to best use it. You know, I've designed an artist starter kit with all your artist documents that anybody who wants to show in galleries or write and apply for grants or residencies, and even artists who want to sell direct or have a hybrid model need to have. And so I'm a big believer in being prepared for these fantastic opportunities that can come to us oftentimes at the last minute. So having, you know, your artist statement ready and having the short, medium, long version of your bio ready so that you literally can send an email in a few minutes versus spending hours cramming right before you have to hit this midnight deadline or whatever it typically is, you know. So yeah.
We kind of touched on this a little bit the last time we talked, but it's also when you are either just a practicing artist, or if you've gone and sought out that arts education, these things are very frequently left out. And the high schools, elementary schools, junior highs are very limited in most of their art education ability. And then you get into college and the classes are very siloed, and you know, you might be focusing on mediums, but I never had the opportunity to take an art business class or an art law course. And
Me neither.
So
Oh my gosh.
Those things are so important, and you know, they aren't easily accessible a lot of the time. So I think having this out there is great, because it's for artists that are practicing, or for, you know, students that are maybe still studying art in college, and this could be really useful for either one of those.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, it's been a while since I've done my BFA, but I can tell you that I still frequently talk to artists. Some of them have MFAs, BFAs, some of them are self-taught. So it really you know, can go all different aspects, but none of them have training in marketing, in basic business, in art law, in like how to actually be a working artist and make a living from it. And so it's always just around the building the body of work and you know, that type of thing. But to actually be a financially successful artist and have a profitable art business. I don't care if you call yourself an entrepreneur or it's your art career. Essentially, it's the same thing. If you want to actually make money from your art, there's so many different ways of doing it, and you can easily make multiple 6 figures and even 7 figures if you're intentional and your art lends itself to certain types of, you know, knowledge sharing or art productization. And those are all things that we talk about as possibilities in the program.
Is there one consistent thread that you've heard from either your podcast guests that have art businesses or any success stories from people that you've mentored with your business? Is there like one key factor to a successful arts business that you've seen?
This might surprise you, but a good friend of mine said, your art business is built at the speed of relationships. And I think that can really apply to many different businesses or business models. And that is, you need to be out there either in person or online, connecting with people, sharing what it is that you do, and building relationships with people. And a one-time connection is not enough. It needs to be nurturing of an ongoing relationships with you know, gallery owners, if that's the route you want to go, with art consultants, art dealers, curators, marketers, coaches like me, you know, even connecting and building relationships with potential art collectors. You know, art buying is such a personal and oftentimes very emotional process. I think, you know, the top 1% buy for investment purposes. So that's not the category I'm talking about, because that's a total different price range of art too. But a lot of times art buying, it can be very impulsive and is a decision made either fairly quickly, depending on the location and how much budget they discretionary budget really that they have figured out. And then also it can be a purchase that will be planned for the future. If it's a larger expense, you know, they might need to consider another person in making the purchase, or they could be building a home or a corporate space and are seeking art for that. And so, you know, you need to be at the top of mind of people. So it's important to be engaged with your audience on various platforms, but also email marketing is super important. Plus it's essentially quote unquote free way to market.